Hi, I'm Shanna Swan. I'm a reproductive epidemiologist, and for about 20 plus years, I've been studying declining sperm count and declining fertility. And my particular interest as an environmental epidemiologist is what's in the environment that's driving these trends. And I focused on a class of chemicals which is known as endocrine disruptors, endocrine disrupting chemicals, sometimes called hormone hackers, that have the ability to affect our body's hormones. And most interesting to me, the steroid hormones, testosterone and estrogen, which are intimately related to reproductive function. So I've conducted studies in U.S. populations looking at how the mother's exposure during pregnancy to these endocrine disrupting chemicals affects reproductive development in the newborn and so on. The chemicals I've been studying the most and that I'm most concerned about are called phthalates. And phthalates are concerning because they make plastic soft and they lower testosterone. So anything which is a soft plastic is of concern, and anything that goes through a soft plastic is likely to pick up the phthalates in that passage because they're not chemically bound to the matrix, and so that the phthalate enters the media, could be food, could be water, could be blood in an IV bag, and carries the phthalate with it. And we can measure that. So, for example, newborn infants in a NICU are fed through plastic tubing. Everyone's seen that, right? All these tubes going into the baby. Those are all made with phthalates. And so in our university, we measured phthalate levels in the urine that these newborns produced and showed that that was related to the number of tubes entering their body. They also found in samples after people get dialysis and chemotherapy and so on. So it's really kind of horrifying, if you will, in a medical setting where doctors are promised to do no harm. They're introducing these chemicals into patients in a medical setting. They're also found in our food. A cow that's milked with a milking machine that has plastic tubing, it's been shown that those phthalates show up in the milk. So anything that goes through plastic tubing, particularly if it's warm, like cow's milk, will pull the phthalates out of the matrix and end up in our bodies. So those are just some examples. There are many, many, many more. I'm also concerned about bisphenols, which line tin cans, which are actually pro-estrogenic as opposed to anti-androgenic. There are PFAS chemicals that affect thyroid function that are in Teflon pans and a jacket that's water resistant, and so on and so forth. There's a very large body of these endocrine disrupting chemicals, but as a class, you can say their danger is altering our natural hormonal systems. The actions that consumers can take are important but insufficient. And I should mention that it's not an equal opportunity for everybody, because if you don't live near a farmer's market, if you don't live near a market that has food that's not wrapped in plastic, you can't buy those things. If you don't have the time to actually get an app and scan the products that you buy in stores, which will tell you the ingredients, it's an equity issue, okay? There's, if you're low income, if you're disadvantaged in some way, you will not be able to take these actions. Aside from that, it is not our job to do this. This is a job that the government should be doing for us, and the companies should be looking out for the safety of their products. So we only look after these things because the real responsible parties are not doing it. Okay? So we're not going to solve this on our own. We're going to have safer chemicals. We're going to have industries buying into cleaning up their products, and we're going to have regulation that tests the very large number in the thousands and tens of thousands of products that have never been tested. What water should you drink? That's a hard question, isn't it? And bottled water, which has been stored in a soft plastic usually, is not a good choice because of the phthalates that are in there. And microplastics, of course, have been found in bottled water. The alternatives, I would say, are three. You can distill your water in a tabletop distiller, which is actually what I do, steam distilled. And if you do it in a glass container, it's not going to be touching plastic. And then you put it in the fridge in a glass container, pretty good to go. You can use filtration. That depends on the quality of the filter and changing it appropriately, and also what the container is made of. So I think the guidance here is try not to drink water that has come in contact with plastic. As far as the water quality itself, that's a different question and an interesting one, which I actually studied for years when I was working for the California Department of Health. And we tested a lot of water, and actually bottled water was not safer than tap water. There are many impacts of toxic chemicals on reproductive function, and that includes men, women, and non-human animals. Okay, so let's start with the men, and the most obvious and the one that that I've studied the most is sperm count. So we showed that sperm count was declining at the rate of 1% per year or more, and then we followed that up with another study which showed it was actually, since 2000, over 2% per year, declining worldwide. Worldwide. Count. That's count. Morphology, shape, motility, motion are more difficult. And they're more difficult because the methods of measuring those have changed over time. Count has not changed. So that's really neat, because you can say, using the same methods, we see this decline. But for motility and morphology, it's more complicated. So I'm not going to make any statements about those, but to say that they are correlated, and they all relate to fertility. Okay? So there are other abnormalities that males can have, but I think I can leave that. And because the female is often left out of this picture, it takes, of course, a man and a woman to conceive. And the woman's reproductive function is at least as important as the man's. And so the quality of the eggs that women have can be affected by chemicals she's exposed to. However, while you can count sperm and look at them under a microscope pretty easily, you can't do that with eggs. So the studies on the female side, because of the inaccessibility of the female's reproductive organs, are much, if you would say, much fewer, and we have much less information. But we can look at things like polycystic ovarian syndrome has gone up. Miscarriage, which is a joint male-female, both contribute to that. That has gone up, also about 1% per year. And I think most dramatically, fertility, there's a male and a female contribution. So we can't really separate those. It's really how well the woman functions, how well the man functions, and then the interaction between those two, right? So those are just some ways that these chemicals are affecting our reproductive health. And non-human species are also suffering fertility declines at about the same rate as humans. So I can't point the finger at anyone who is accountable. I think everyone will want to and probably should pay attention to what enters their body. And by the way, these chemicals come in through ingestion, food and drink, through absorption, creams on our hands and so on, and through inhalation, think hairspray and nail polish. Okay, so all of those things are conveying exposure. And I think that the more people are aware of that and more they can reduce their exposure, they're taking their health into their own hands, and that's great. But it is really not their job. And really, just as we expect that the FDA will protect us against drugs that will harm us or will not market drugs that will harm us, we don't have that protection for these products. So I think governments, the EU is doing better, the US is doing worse, but nobody's doing it very well. And then the producers are responsible with to think about the health impacts of the products they are producing and try to lessen their toxicity. So I would say it's multi-causal, many people responsible, many groups responsible, but it's urgent. I want to stress that. This is an urgent problem. We cannot continue to decline. We're already, half the population lives in countries that are not replacing themselves. Okay? 2.1 children per couple is replacement. More than half people in the world are in countries that are not replacing themselves. We cannot go on at this rate, or as my colleague Jerry Grantham says, we'll soon be out of business.